even while I was very, very deep in a life that was very out of balance, I was still open to new ideas and collecting those ideas. So I like to say it's like God laid the rails for my new life, even while I was destroying myself, even while I was, as I think the British say, digging my grave with my own fork.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxane Salonen, faith columnist and features writer for the forum, author, and speaker. In this episode, I ask Erin McCole Cupp the question, what is original innocence and what does it have to do with food? I first came across Erin this past Lent, just hours after I had decided to give up sugar for Lent. Why sugar? Because I had begun to identify that I don't just like sugar, but I'm probably what you'd call a sugar addict. And I know I'm not alone. Erin had recently started a course filled with good Theology of the Body for food addicts, and she needed another couple people to round out her next cohort, a small group with whom she offers guidance and education for finding new ways of approaching our relationship with food. I knew I'd need an accountability team, so sort of on a whim, I signed up for her 6-week study. And honestly, it went way beyond my expectations. The program, which mixes spiritual wisdom with modern psychology, helped me understand myself and others better, and trained me to treat myself with compassion when it comes to my weaknesses, especially in the realm of food balance. I can't wait for Erin to share with us how she lost 100 pounds simply by looking at her relationship with food from a spiritual and psychological perspective. The fascinating concepts she'll introduce can be applied not just to food, but to every area of our lives where we need balance. Erin is grateful to be recovering from compulsive overeating, binge behaviors, and developmental and betrayal trauma. She coaches, writes, and speaks about mental health, family trauma, and addiction recovery from a Catholic and spiritual perspective. With that, let's hear from Erin herself now on her journey to food freedom and relationship abundance. Thanks so much, Erin, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Roxane. Thanks so much for this opportunity to chat with your listeners, but to get together with you again.
Yes, yeah. I've missed your voice now that I completed the course, and I know you're moving on with other cohorts, and we have our own little group that we've been meeting with weekly, but you were a wonderful guide as we were journeying into this food recovery program, food addiction recovery program, which it's interesting because I never really considered myself a food addict, but as we went through your program, I realized, yeah, I am. I kind of fall to gluttony here and again. So anyway, I just was really, I kind of started your Filled with Good program just because I felt like I needed accountability during Lent to follow through with my commitments, and it was just a really interesting journey and more than I expected. So before we dive into that, why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about who you are, what brings joy to you, and how you got into what you're doing now, and then explain a little bit more about Theology of the Body, which is kind of the base, one of the bases for what you do, and then a little bit more about Original Innocence, which is the topic that we're discussing today. What is Original Innocence? So we'll start with a little bit about you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I love how you asked, what fills me with joy. Right now, what fills me with joy is I live out in the country in southeastern, south central Pennsylvania, and it's fall season, so I get to see all these little baby horses all over the place. But anyway, more about that brings me joy. But obviously, it wasn't always joy. I came from a family that was marked by some pretty severe dysfunction, which included disordered approaches to food. So I cannot remember a time when food was not like foremost in my mind, like the biggest thing I had to think about. And as I got older, I got the sense, about the first time I remember dieting was I was in 3rd grade, and it wasn't even so much a diet. It was, hey, you know what? If I give up snacks for Lent, then I'll lose weight. Keep in mind, I'm in third grade. I'll lose weight and I'll get my mom's approval and everything will be happy. And now I look back at myself, pictures of myself in, when I was in third grade, I'm like, that's just insane. Who was telling this child she was the wrong shape? But what I discovered even at that age was I couldn't maintain it. I couldn't maintain that level of self-denial. And I'm not using the term self-denial in the holy sense, in the sense of self-control, but in the sense of acting like what I really needed didn't exist. Like that's an unholy self-denial, and I couldn't maintain that. And so I developed from that early age a binge restrict cycle. But unusually when you hear somebody who's doing a binge restrict, you'll hear the thing, well, you know what, I'm going to fast tomorrow. So to make up for all of the extra treats I ate today or something like that. What my cycle was, I would use restriction as an excuse to binge. Like, I'm going to pick this day to fast. So really what I was planning was a day to binge and then the day after the fasting to binge. Went on several diets over decades through the course of my life. Reached, I think I had just dipped a toe into what the BMI would classify as morbid obesity. And along this time, I was blessed to just find the right therapist at the right time. I had been trying to find a therapist for 25 years, one who would not act like my faith was the problem, because I had run into several who dismissed my personal faith, which made it hard to trust them, and it made me feel less than. So I couldn't make things work with any of those therapists, no matter how hard I tried. And finally, I found one, again, after 25 years of searching, who, walked me through, with full respect for my faith, walked me through a lot of the, difficult roadblocks that had been thrown up in my life as a result of my upbringing. And one of those roadblocks was my approach to food. And I, remember telling him, look, it's not like I don't know how to eat. I've been on all these diets. I know what way of eating makes me feel the healthiest, because I had, lost 80 pounds and then gained it and then some back. And then I lost 60 pounds and gained some of it back. And then I lost 30 pounds and gained some of it back. The whole yo-yo cycle. And so I talked to my therapist about that, and he said, well, let's approach this like an addiction, because he was also an addictions counselor. And he, helped me develop a recovery program for myself, that as I was going through this recovery program and doing all these things that all of these smarter people than I said worked, and I was discovering that they worked, I remember thinking, wow, this sounds a lot like this concept that's called theology of the body, which is, it comes to us from the writings of Pope John Paul II, who basically, he took 4 years to tell people that the human body is the story of God's love for us. God's love present in how human relationships work, and how when human relationships work the way they were designed to, new life is created. Now, literally, sometimes that results in a human being being created, but it can also turn into other forms of new life. And for me, that was life without those food behaviors. And I remember thinking, as I was going through my recovery program for my eating behaviors, thinking, wow, no wonder this, particular thing works. It's just because it's the theology of the body. Of course, this makes sense, because it just matches with how spirituality and our physical bodies work together. Why is nobody talking about this? Why has nobody written about this before? And then it finally hit me. Oh, I'm supposed to write about it. So I did. So after I had after I had reached my 100-pound weight loss goal and had been binge free for, by that point, I think a little over a year and a half. This was all during, a lot of this happened during COVID lockdown. So timelines get a little fuzzy. uh,
Yes.
but yeah, I started working on that, and that's what I'm working with right now. We launched it in January of 2023, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch people come through this program, to see these tools working for them. So it's so
Yeah.
validating to see, like, they worked for me, and now I'm seeing them work for other people, and it's just amazing. It's blowing my mind.
So part of the program, as I mentioned earlier, and as the topic, is this idea of original innocence. Now, I know that we're kind of jumping way ahead, and there's like a lot there, but let's just kind of grab that for a second. Most of us have heard of original sin, but what is original innocence? I had never heard it before. I've heard, I know some things about theology of the body. I haven't grasped the whole thing. There's a lot there. I was just kind of reading some of John Paul II's writings this morning, and he's very deep. So, and you can kind of grasp bits of it, and it's so beautiful. But can you summarize, like, give us an introduction to original innocence? Because when I heard you say that, like, I immediately kind of had I knew what you were talking about. Just instinctively, I knew that there was a part of us that we were innocent in the beginning. Like, there's an innocence to all of this, and how do we reclaim that? So anyway, I'll let you explain it a little bit.
Yeah. So, like you said, everybody knows, not everybody, but a lot of people have heard, at least culturally, about the concept of original sin. And that concept itself gets, a bad rap in a lot of ways, in this idea that, oh, well, humans are completely depraved, and, no wonder nobody wants to be, follow that particular religion anymore, and so on. All original sin is that once the first humans sinned, things went sideways. That's really pretty much it.
Yeah.
Theologians, feel free to, email me with your complaints about how that's wrong. That's fine. I love to learn. But so all that original innocence is referring to is, what was it like before that happened? What was it like before the first humans sinned? What was their relationship with God like? What was their relationship with each other like? And what was their relationship with stuff like? So in a world before food became this attachment figure, when humans are supposed to be our earthly attachment figures, before food became this attachment figure, what was it like to eat? What was it like to sit down and nourish your body without ever having been hurt by another human being, without ever having any kind of pain that could be so easily exchanged or feel easily exchanged for food? Because really, that's all I was doing. And the people that I've encountered in Filled with Good, that's pretty much all they've been doing too. It's trying to trade some kind of discomfort for food. And so original innocence poses the question, well, what was it like before that happened? What was it like before that was an option? And what can we do to live that way now, even in this fallen world? And so that creates room for all sorts of scaffolding to be created so that we can live with innocence now, even though, the time and space of original innocence has passed, because here we are, we're in this world. I think it's G.K. Chesterton who says something along the lines of, the one thing all human religions agree on is that there's something wrong with us.
Right.
So, whatever spiritual perspective you've got right now, we all know that we're not right. We're not perfect.
Uh-huh.
So original innocence gives us that space to ask ourselves, okay, what was the world like before humans went sideways? And what would it be like for me to live now as if I didn't have to harm myself or others? What would I think? What would I spend my time on? And in the end, how would I eat? And that question, that what if, has been very, very powerful for me. And now I've gotten the opportunity to see it be powerful for others as well.
As you're talking and describing it, I'm seeing how all the different components have come together. Obviously, the original innocence connected to original sin. And then what you're talking about is that there's some kind of hurt or wound or something that causes us to interact with food in a certain way. And then you take how imbalanced we are with food. I'm just thinking of a menu at a typical restaurant and just how food kind of bombards us. And the other difficulty is that unlike some other addictions, things where we get off balance, food is something we need every day. So it seems like it's a particularly difficult addiction to sort of have balance about. I mean, all addictions are difficult, I'm not saying, but food is constantly something we need, right, to live.
Right.
So, but just I'm hearing the psychological component, the spiritual component, and it's so beautiful how everything has been integrated in this, and even that you knew enough about theology of the body to make a connection. Had you studied it, or how did you have that light bulb moment that, oh, these things connect?
Oh, well, funny story. While I was busy eating myself into morbid obesity, I was also reading all these theological books. And I remember I would have like a book about the theology of the body in one hand and a bag of chips in the other. And I'd be eating and not making the connection. So it wasn't until I, was trying to do these things with my whole self, including my body, that I was able to live the connection, and that's what created that aha moment. And so that's why I have hope that I've seen it happen in my life, that even while I was very, very deep in a life that was very out of balance, I was still open to new ideas and collecting those ideas. So I like to say it's like God laid the rails for my new life, even while I was destroying myself, even while I was, as I think the British say, digging my grave with my own fork. And so that's, for anybody who's listening, who's, in some sort of despair, like, I will always be this way, this will never change.
Yeah.
What if you're wrong?
Yeah.
What if you're wrong about that? What if maybe you are changing already? It's just kind of dormant, and something will click for you and help you, move into something new as well.
I think that's one of the things that the program, the classes gave me, was hope, because I knew something needed to change. I knew it had to involve someone helping me, but I didn't know where to go with that. Why don't you share a little bit about, you were talking about how you've seen transformations in others. What are some of the observations, the experiences, the feedback you've been getting from others, and some of the epiphanies others have been having? And I'm sure as they're having those, you're continuing to grow as well and learn from others' experiences.
Oh, wow. That's a really broad question. There are so many different things. Let me see if I can try to boil it down. I do have sort of like a prep course for Filled with Good, and the little self-paced, do it yourself in your own time when you're ready course is called Real Food: Catholic Virtues for Permanent Weight Loss. And in it, I talk about these concepts that I sort of collected when I started working with people and teaching them, my tools and Filled with Good. And the first transformation I've seen that people need is that they don't even think it's possible to live without these food behaviors, whether those food behaviors are overeating or undereating or some sort of purging activity to, escape or erase the effects of calories being ingested. It doesn't even occur to us. It didn't even occur to me that it could be possible to live without those behaviors, because I hadn't for so long. And so that's kind of like an act of faith to believe, well, or even just wonder, well, what if it is possible to go through a day without binging? What if it is possible to go through a day without overeating? And then the next thing that I've seen activate, this type of, it sounds weird to call it growth because for most of it is shrinking. But it is spiritual growth. This type of, growth in the heart and the emotions is the hope that, well, what if I do try something different and things turn out well? What if things do get better because I'm using these tools that I've never used before, or I've never used in this way with this mindset? And then I think the two following biggest hurdles are, one is a level of self-love, in the sense of when we've been living with out of balance behaviors for a very long time, it's going to cause discomfort to change those behaviors. We're going to have to live with some discomfort until we experience that living a different way might actually feel better. And even then, it's still a struggle. And so the idea that I am worth that difficulty, I am lovable enough that I can experience constructive discomfort for my own sake, and seeing other people adopt that possibility in their own choices as well, has been really powerful. Because how often did I, and did so many of my clients, go through life saying things like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I eat. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm just going to eat what I want. I'm not, even when I do eat quote unquote healthily, then I still gained a pound. So what does it matter? I'm not going to do this difficult thing for myself because I'm not worth it. When that's,
I was thinking
true.
too, when you were explaining like original sin and the connection, that there might be a tendency for some people to say, well, we're not in original innocence anymore. So we are in this state of original sin. And so why try to break through? What would you say to that?
That's a really good question. If somebody said, why bother? I would tend to just say, well, why not? Like, what are you getting from whatever harm you are causing that's worth it long term? So if we're in, like, I could make a long, long list of all of the ways it felt like food was helping me. It helped me calm down. It helped me relax. It helped me, free my mind from worries. Now, granted, it would only do those things for like maybe 2 seconds, if that. But in the moment, it felt like it worked. See, we do these things not because we're stupid. We do these things because they feel like they help us survive. And one of the things about, the concept of original sin is it impacted the world in such a way that our behaviors, we can think that we're stuck. But what if we're not? And just that idea of, what if it does make a difference? What if it does actually feel better long term? Are you willing to try something that will make you feel better 3 hours from now, instead of continuing to do the thing that is going to make you feel worse 3 seconds from now?
Yeah. So I think it's a good time to kind of maybe go into some of the tools that you use and that you teach, and give people a way to break through those obstacles. And what I found is it's such a positive program where shame is really challenged. And I think we all live, and that's another concept, right? Original shame kind of came right after original sin, right? And suddenly we realized we were naked and exposed, and we are so scared to go there. So you do it very slowly and compassionately, and I really appreciated that, because some of us, have lived with with the naughty little girl or whatever, from our past, for whatever reason. And so that's where the psychological aspect comes in. Of course, spiritual too, because we need to look at ourselves the way God does, right? He's the original dad, the original
Yes, he's the original
parent.
dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of those beautiful tools? Like, I think anyone, honestly, whether they feel addicted to something or not, could benefit from learning how to observe nature and learning to talk to yourself in a more compassionate way. So maybe you can kind of share some of those daily things that you offer and suggest people do to break through those obstacles.
Yeah, that first, you talked about the power of shame, and how that when you were saying that, it made me think of how I and pretty much all of my clients got the message that if I could just berate myself into behaving well, everything would be fine. And if that were going to work, it would have worked by now. And the other challenge with berating ourselves when we're, constantly putting ourselves down for any little mistake, we create this basically like this torture chamber inside of our own heads. And as I was saying before, that, compulsive behaviors such as compulsive eating is probably usually just a means of exchanging discomfort for something that feels comforting. If our own minds are a torture chamber and our own minds are a place where we experience unnecessary pain, that's just going to give us more reason to go to the food more often. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
And so a big part of one of the skills that I teach in Filled with Good is something called an of course statement, where we give ourselves compassion for either something we are tempted to do or something we've already done. So let me think of an of course statement that I could use for myself. Of course, I want to, the thing I'm using my own tools on right now to break is compulsive phone scrolling. That's one of the things with addiction. Sometimes we're tempted to just transfer one addiction to another. And my goal is to live free. So really, whenever we transfer an addiction, it's called switching seats on the Titanic. So I'm trying to get out of that seat.
Never heard of that.
I heard that just recently. I thought it was hilarious. Of my compulsive phone scrolling. So of course I want to look at my phone when I'm experiencing some kind of distress, because I don't have to answer anything that comes up on my phone. I can just let it happen. So there's the comfort in not having to respond. Nobody expects anything out of me when I'm just looking at my phone. And so it creates this false feeling of relaxation. Of course that looks good. Now I can then go back and look at, all right, so what am I actually trying to achieve here? I'm trying to achieve relaxation. Is there a way I can relax that doesn't make my whole body tense up like it does when I'm trying to hold my phone still and watch something and concentrate? Yeah, I can go, like you said, go look at nature. And that, leads right into one of the other tools of that I teach in Filled with Good, and that's nature observation. And this is something that is actually not really mentioned in the theology of the body explicitly, but very implicitly in that part of being a human. The first job we got before we even sinned was to watch over nature, watch over our environment, watch over, the creatures, and they're in our care. And one of the things I discovered was that when I would just sit still for 10 minutes a day and look out a window and just, observe what would happen, I got so much better at letting time pass without having to change anything about the time. So for instance, when I would get, some sort of craving but I wasn't really hungry, and I, part of my balance plan is to eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm not. If I would get a craving but not really have hunger, I know, and I've long known, like the longest a craving can wait is 20 minutes and then it fades away. All I needed to do was wait for 20 minutes. And the practice of just letting time pass, some people call it meditation, just letting time pass without having to do anything or change anything, gave me this power that when cravings would come up, or, a desire for something that I didn't need in the moment or wouldn't be helpful to me in the moment when that did come up, I was able to say to myself, wait, if I can let 10 minutes pass away, or if I can let a bird fly away without having to chase it down just because it's cute, I can do the same thing with this, chocolate bar, with this whatever craving I've got at the moment. I can just let that pass. And that's been very powerful too, because the freedom that comes from not having to follow my every whim is just so powerful. So powerful.
Yeah. And we're following a lot of whims these days. It seems like there's so much distraction and things that are pulling us every which way. And to kind of calm down and rethink things is just that in itself. I'm looking out my window right now, and our at the moment, our crabapple, I live in a little cul-de-sac, and it's a little circle, and this is the most glorious time of year in our neighborhood because we have these different shades of crabapple blossoms, and sometimes they come for a day and get blown away the next day, but this time they're staying a bit, and they are just so beautiful and such a gift, and it just connects right away with what you're saying. So I love
actually,
that.
Can I touch on something that you just said about the blossoms blowing away? Like those blossoms that people are staying right now, they're not going to stay forever, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was another thing that nature observation taught me, over the course of the months and now years that I've done it, is that everything passes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to pass. This discomfort, it's going to pass. Whatever that discomfort is, this joy, that's going to pass too.
Yeah. Yes.
So we can't hang on to it. We can't force it to stay. It's just going to pass when it's time. And we are at our most free when we are not constantly chasing a joy that's its time has passed, or chasing a discomfort that its time has come.
Well, life really is about letting go, and it's a series of letting go moments from beginning to end. We're letting go, so that we can embrace more. That's the spiritual perspective, right? The vision of the beatific vision, the vision of heaven. That's where we'll have the more, and so it all comes together in a circle, and it's beautiful. I think we'll stop here and take a little pause. On the other side of the pause, I'd love to hear more about the spiritual aspect and how God plays a part in this for you. And so we will talk more. Erin, thank you so much for what you've given us so far. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the spiritual aspect of Filled with Good. So we'll talk to you after this break.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. We are here this morning with Erin McCole Cupp, who is introducing the concept of original innocence and what does it have to do with food. So there's so much to think about here and process, and I'm sure your mind is just being blown, as mine has been, with this program that I took part in during Lent. And now we want to kind of move into the area of spirituality, matters of soul importance. What does this have to do with heaven and God and all of that? So Erin's going to share a little bit about how that aspect of it comes into the program that she offers.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity for me to look at how prayer, what we would call prayer, what is prayer, is involved and filled with good. And a big piece of recovery from addiction or any compulsion or unhealthy attachment is to stop isolating, because the one thing that my recovery journey highlighted for me in what I already knew about the theology of the body is that God made us for relationship with the personal. He did not make us to isolate with stuff. He did not make us to isolate with material things. So, and that's shown very clearly in the story of how, Adam and Eve fell, how they were told to not eat of the particular fruit of this particular tree, and they reached for a thing instead of reaching for God. And that's what, caused everything to all the whole Jenga tower came tumbling down. And so the danger, the thing that gets us into whatever our addictions, compulsions, or unhealthy attachments are, is we're isolating. We are detaching ourselves from the help that God can provide and the help that God can provide through loving people, and trying to get that help through something else. That could be, I like to say, it could be street drugs, it could be street tacos, but the mechanism is the same. We're still trying to fix our own discomforts outside of relationship. And so what the theology of the body teaches us is that we humans are the only creatures on earth who can relate to God as beings created in his image and likeness. And that's a concept called original solitude. We are the only creatures who can relate to God as creations made in his image and likeness. And there's another theology of the body concept called original unity, meaning we humans are the only creatures who can relate to each other as being made in the image and likeness of God. And so we were made to find our meaning in our relationship with God and our relationship with humans. Now, because it's a fallen world, the humans are usually the ones that hurt us the most. So it's really hard to trust them. And that also teaches us, since we are made in the image and likeness of God, and so are the other humans, that persons are sources of pain for us. And therefore, we want to hide with some sort of thing. For me, it was primarily food. Occasionally now, like my phone is the thing that calls for me. And, you can name a million different addictions, and they do the same thing. The part that prayer plays is a relational one. The part that prayer plays in Filled with Good, Theology, the Body for Food Addicts, because it's about learning to have a relationship with God that is not completely about how awful we are, how much we do wrong, how many sins we make. Because if we only see God as a complainer and a criticizer, we only see God as a source of pain, we're going to run the other way and go towards those addictions and compulsions and unhealthy attachments that never complain about us. I've never had a bag of chips complain about me. Not once. So what Filled with Good is designed to do is to heal that breach in our own minds, that we have to fix our own pains completely by ourselves. And instead, Filled with Good is about rebuilding relationship with the personal, which is with God and with other human beings.
Right. When you talked about the apple, I don't know why I didn't make the connection that it was food. I mean, the fruit or whatever, that it was actually something eaten, and I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier, is that we all have to eat. It's such a basic thing that we have to do to live. And I don't know. I just hadn't completely made that connection before when thinking through all this. It's so primal.
Yeah. And I don't like to give the enemy more credit than he's worth, but
yeah,
he went after the thing that we knew we needed.
Yeah.
And he twisted it. Just like with everything, do we need comfort? Absolutely. Do we need it from painkillers? Generally, no. Do we need comfort? Sure thing. Do we need it from cookies? No. I mean, unless the actual pain is hunger.
Is there a temptation or the possibility that we could, if we really entered into this, that we would quit enjoying food? How do you find that balance, Erin, between being balanced about it, but also still enjoying it as the gift that it is? Like, God didn't give us a powder that was gray and didn't taste like, he gave us taste buds. So there was something there that he wanted us to have some pleasure also in eating. How do you balance that out?
Yeah, he wanted us to have some pleasure in eating, and he also wanted us to have, connection in eating. Like there's, family meals, and, people go out to restaurants, and, it's usually to socialize in some way. So how do we strike that balance? For me, what has been the most effective is just learning to slow down and remember that every bite I get is a gift. And to, for me, what's really important is to have a varied enough, I don't want to use the word diet here because it's got so many connotations I don't want to use. What's important for me is to have a varied enough palette of foods that I enjoy, or that I get to use as fuel, not just for the nutritional benefits, but also for the newness of each eating experience. Like, I will never have another eating experience like that again. So I don't have to chase this one particular feeling that I got with this one particular food anymore. I'm going to get something else when the time is right. And I know you identified yourself as a sugar addict, and I respect that. Like there are people that for whatever reason, a particular food or a particular flavor profile just sets them off. What I discovered for myself was, early in recovery, I was asked to identify my trigger foods that I couldn't stop eating. And I'm like, I've binged on celery and carrots without ranch dressing. Like, food is my trigger. What do I do? So I guess, like, now that's coming out of my mouth, like, for a while, I was like, gosh, I wish I just had some trigger foods, because then I could just, get rid of those and go about my merry way. But now I see, like, just in this astute question that you asked, Roxane, that, it was God's way of making sure that there's somebody out there who, has the opportunity, has the duty to live in balance with a wide range of flavor profiles, because I was able to live way out of balance with that wide range of flavor profiles. And so again, it just kind of comes back to living like everything I have is a gift, including my next bite and including my next hunger grumble.
Yeah, it's funny because my stomach's been grumbling.
Same here, funny enough.
One thing, I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out. I didn't ask this question before, but it's just something that I thought of when I like the idea of just remembering that food is fuel, that it can be pleasurable, but you don't have to like hold on to that. You can move on. But I also just thought about, people that don't have enough food and maybe just, I mean, not to guilt us. I'm not saying that, but just kind of gives like just perspective, I guess, is what your program is about. And I think that can be maybe a helpful, I'm not sure, but just to be aware spiritually of others that don't have an abundance like we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, because Thomas Aquinas, I believe, says that when we hoard, we are stealing from the poor. And for those of us who were raised with clean your plate, so, we can help the starving children in Cambodia. I'm dating myself. That was the Cambodia or Ethiopia at the time. Before that, it was China, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's misguided, because if we clear our plates when we're not hungry anymore, we actually stretch our stomachs, which makes it harder to get full, which means we want more and more food, which means we're spending more and more money on food, which means we have less money to help our impoverished neighbors. We cut ourselves off from relationship with those people, with those persons.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's another thing I, discovered actually, along the line with working with people in Filled with Good after the program was, initially created, that the whole idea of I can't waste food. The thing is, if we eat when we're not hungry, we're wasting it even more than if we just put it in, compost. Because at least if it goes into the compost, or, so even if it goes into a landfill, at least it's going to biodegrade. Whereas if I take on all this extra, weight on myself that I don't need, not only am I, spending money that I don't really need to spend on food, I'm also driving that around in a car, which impacts the environment. So in a way, if I eat food just to not waste it, I'm actually wasting it more.
Right. There's so many angles
to scrape that.
Yeah. I found one little helpful tool, and I had found it before, but I'm returning to it, is like, if you go out to eat, just ask for the doggy bag right away and just ask for the container. And then I just put half in there, and then I have another meal later, so that I'm not, gorging on that one meal and extra helpings, or, the big portions. So, I mean, yeah, there's so many different approaches here. Even if not everyone can invest in this program, and I will say that this program was very reasonable. You've made it really easy for people to take part. What do you wish everyone listening could know about Filled with Good and Original Innocence? Just in general, what would you offer to people?
That there's hope, that we are not stuck, that we are not doomed, that we are not trapped. It is possible to live in a different way than you have. If this has been a struggle for any amount of time, our brains can run into this rut of, well, this is just the way I am. And maybe you don't have to be. That there's a different way of doing things. You are not trapped. I think that's the one thing, if I could just impress to anybody, even if they, don't join if they don't join Filled with Good, as long as they have the gift of the mental flexibility of saying, I could do things differently and still be okay, then that would be enough for me.
One of the things I wanted to know about too, before we go, Erin, is you recently got certified as a trauma recovery coach. Can you tell us just a little bit about that and how people can connect with you on either of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. Certified trauma recovery coaching is an additional ministry I offer. What I do is help people who have experienced some kind of trauma. I focus on complex relational trauma. So that is when you've experienced the person who is supposed to help you is the person who hurts you. That creates a situation called complex trauma. So I've been trained to work with folks who have experienced that to create a life that they love to live, so that we are not stuck in those patterns that trauma has taught us to think we are trapped in. Now, one of those patterns could be, compulsive food behaviors, and there are any number of other patterns that we go to isolate from people, so that we can feel safe. And what my practice is about, as a trauma recovery coach, is to help people gain the tools they need and practice the tools that help them most to love living and to love being in community, either again or for the first time. And, I've been doing this for since February, and it's just already been an amazing experience to be able to walk that path with my clients.
One thing I really see, Erin, is you are removing the shackles from a lot of people's souls and lives, and it's so beautiful. And I know that you were there, you were bound, and now want to bring the good news to others. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to do that for others, and that you have a heart to do that. And you're just you have so many beautiful insights. So I just want to thank you for that. And you might have done this already, but this one question I do want to ask: what do you believe God wants to say to each of us right now? Like, just as his children, what do you think he would want to say to us?
I think he'd want us to hear him say, "You are free." And I think he'd want to say that because the most important gift I believe God has given us is our free will, because that is the gift that makes love possible. There is no love without free will. And I think God would want us to hear him say, "You are free," so that we see that we have that gift and we understand we can use that to cause harm either to ourselves and or others, or we can use that gift. We are free to make things better in any way that is within our own power, when we cooperate with God's power.
Mm-hmm.
So I think God wants us to know that we are free.
Do you have any concluding thoughts from anything we've talked about relating to original innocence, our relationship with food, our relationship with others? Any takeaways that you just want to make sure we hear about today before we conclude?
Yeah, I just hope that listeners just can remember that we are made for relationship, not isolation, and find some way to reach out to people who reach back with love. It is a fallen world. There are those people who, for whatever reason, they do not reach back with love, but that doesn't mean that those are the only kind of people. There are people who will reach back with love. It's our journey to find those people. And I hope I can be one of those people for you.
Absolutely. Where do people find you? And we will include that in the show notes as well. But if they wanted to just right now go and search you out. And also, I did want to ask if Catholics only or others could take part in the Filled with Good program.
Okay, so to answer the first question, if you go to erinmccolecupp.com, that's got everything I do there. In fact, to sort of have it set up so that you can choose your own adventure, like those little old 80s books, where you can choose, do you want to go down the food freedom path or do you want to go through the trauma recovery path? And then you click your favorite button and go from there. I also have a quiz on my website called "What Kind of Stress Eater Are You?" So you can take that quiz and you'll receive one quick help designed specifically for the type of stress eating you do the most. And then to go back to the question, could you do Filled with Good if you're not Catholic? Absolutely. Just keep in mind that, the spiritual concepts come from the theology of the body. However, what is amazing to me about both the theology of the body and modern secular addiction science is that wherever you turn, they back each other up. And I bring up a lot of studies from modern secular addiction science from researchers like Dr. Bruce Alexander, Dr. Gabor Mate, Judith Grisel, a whole, it's not a big enough program to call it a panoply, but I, bring forth a lot of researchers. I don't think a single one is Catholic, and show how they showed in their research and in their clinical practice in some cases that the theology of the body works. It's why relationship is the most powerful thing to break patterns of addiction and compulsion.
It's just fascinating how it all goes together. And again, I think anyone could benefit from this. And it's been very humbling for me to recognize that, there's a lot of addiction in my family and in my husband's family. But to recognize, no, I actually have fallen into some of these patterns myself, and there is freedom, and it's a beautiful thing, and God wants us to know about it. So, Erin, thank you so much, honestly, for your time today. I know that people are going to be intrigued by what you shared, and I'm just excited for more people to benefit from your insights and your journey. And so thanks for your time.
Thank you for this opportunity, Roxane. God bless.
You too. Take care. I hope that by now you've gotten a taste, pun definitely intended, of what the term original innocence signifies. I especially love what Erin said at the beginning of the interview regarding Theology of the Body, the volume of work by Pope John Paul II, 4 years worth of public addresses that communicate, in essence, as Erin said, how the human body is the story of God's love for us, God's presence, and how human relationships work. What would it have been like before original sin entered in, to sit down in the garden with God and a friend? I imagine myself outside at a picnic table, for lack of a better visual, conversing delightedly in awe of being in the presence of and relationship with the living God, the one who created me. At the beginning of each Filled with Good session, Erin prays what she calls the Get Hungry prayer, hearkening back to Luke 1, known as the Canticle of Mary, in which Mary proclaims the greatness of the Lord, the one who has looked upon his handmaiden's lowliness and done great things for her. The hungry he has filled with good things, she said. The rich he has sent away empty. Now, food is certainly part of all this, but even more important are those with whom we keep company. Hunger, after all, isn't just about a hunger in the belly, but a deep hunger in the soul. I think that is what it's at the center of this program, and what Erin is trying to bring others in order to help us live a more abundant life. Rich in wealth? No. Rich in relationship. May we all strive toward that and be more aware of the importance of reaching for the personal, eternal things, rather than that which is material and temporal and will pass quickly by. Well, in a couple of weeks, I'll return with guest Mark Joritsma of the North Dakota Family Alliance, who will help us walk through the question, just a day after the 4th of July holiday, is patriotism dead? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.